See you guys.
What can I get your thoughts on Kirby signing his massive deal? What you thought of that?
It's funny you said it. So I was on right after he signed it, I was on FaceTime with him, and it was such a cool moment because, right, just like seeing that young man here, I can remember the first day we got here, and he was just coming over from offense, and he comes to my office like, man, coach, man, you know how Kirby is, coach, man, I want to go to the league, man, and he hadn't really played much, but what I want to remind people of, and just especially young people, right? The greatest gift you can have is belief in yourself. Like as delusional as that may have been for a player that never really played to come in and say that, like he believed it, and to see that kind of like him walking in and living that now is like a thing of beauty. Obviously walking in, nobody knew who he was, and what he went on to go on to do was just it was awesome to see him. It was awesome for him to have that moment. I'm like super excited for the young man, and all of our former players, who go on to sign contracts or get drafted, like that's what we want to constantly remind these dudes. Like when you're playing here, the goal and focus is for you to be developed both on and off the field, but for also you to reap the rewards that are going to potentially come if you just do what we're asking you to do. And so it was a thing of beauty to kind of, to be on FaceTime with him last night, as I'm sitting in my office. In my office, I got a row of jerseys on my, right when you walk in my office, so when people walk by, it's Sidney Brown, Devin Witherspoon, right, Quan Martin, Tony Adams, and Kirby Joseph all lined up, and so, sometimes pictures and images kind of speaks for themselves, but I grabbed this jersey and I was literally elated for him, man. I couldn't, Coach B walked by the office, he saw me, he heard me yelling, and we were on the phone together, and once I hung up, Coach B was like, who we got, he thought we had time to recruit, he thought somebody had committed to us, and I was like, Coach, Kirby just signed a contract extension that's made him I think it's the highest player or defensive back in NFL history. And so awesome. Grateful for that young man, just the environment that he's coming from. Really excited for him. But as Coach B always says, right, there is more to come, and we're really excited about the future of these young men here now, and what's to come in regards to especially our secondary.
Just one more on Kirby. When did you maybe first get an inkling that the stream that he had, like he was on the path?
I vividly remember it like it was yesterday. Probably playing Virginia. We were getting beat pretty good by Virginia, and he made a play. We were in quarters coverage. He was the backside safety, and he wasn't even supposed to be near this play. And he had an interception in that game, but he made a play on a PBU that was probably like the most instinctive play that I probably had seen a DB make from his quarter of the field. And I can remember being on a plane with Walt, and we're sitting down on a plane, and he made that play, and Walt was like, dude, we got to get this cat on the field. And I remember like it was yesterday, because I don't think he started the game. And he got in, and he had a pick, and he just made a couple plays. He was the backside safety, and he was quarters tracking the quarterback, and he ended up going to the middle. It was an incredible play at that moment. Like that play in particular, he had made plays prior to that, in the course of practice, but that was the first time in a game where I was like, oh my goodness, this dude might be pretty special, that one particular play. So it was versus Virginia when we played him there, in 2021 we played him there.
Aaron, what are your thoughts on maybe when you talked to JMO about D-line depth that you had this spring? What are your thoughts coming out of spring about those guys up front?
Yeah, I really liked our D-line depth. I thought all our guys up front got better. We were able to do some things from a schematic approach that kind of showed their skill level and their ability. And we had some guys really, really jump out, throughout the course of spring ball that obviously coming out of spring, I'm glad that we were really healthy, and some guys made some huge gains. I think about James Thompson, right? I think about Kurt Neal, right? Obviously, Biggs was out for a little bit. You know, I think about Tommy. You know, Alex Bray was doing some awesome things. I mean, we had some guys up front, right? Pat Farrell was, I mean, he had a really, really good spring. You know, I think about Angelo McCullum, right? Demetrius John. I mean, all our D linemen up front, no lie, they got better every single practice. And it was so, I mean, even Gentle before he got banged up a little bit, Gentle made some great strides throughout the course of spring ball. And like, I'm just really excited about that unit moving ahead, you know. I mean, I think what Coach J-Mo has done, you know, I think there's a belief system in that room. And with those young men, like, I think there's a really, really close and tight bond. It's funny enough, so James and Kurt lived together, but they had the D-line over, right? And it's funny you say that. They had the D-line over. This was before we headed into the last week of spring practice. And James comes over to him and is like, Coach Henry, you invited over too, man. You know, you're a former Badger. You're invited over too. So I'm on my way home, and I go and check him out. Got a nice pad, really nice pad. I go and check him out, and all the D-line are over there, and them boys were cooking. I mean, they had threw down. I mean, it was really, really impressive, you know, and we got together, hung out. You know, I was over there for a little bit just to chop it up with the D-line and the brotherhood and you know, just to see those guys connect. I mean, obviously some new faces in that room, to see them grow together, bond together, right? Like, I mean, that's just continuing off of what I think about what T-Rod Edwards had established last year with those guys up front, right? And so it's been awesome throughout the spring just to see the way Coach J-Mo has kind of watched those guys' game elevate. And I think just from an overall standpoint, you know, I think we got a chance to be better up front than we were last year, and I thought we were pretty good up front last year.
Coach, the two players with basically the most accolades, Xavier Scott, Gabe Akis, they had options, obviously, but what's it mean to bring those two guys back? What's it mean for your defense?
Yeah, I mean, those probably just two guys you guys heard about. There were way more guys that had options on our roster than probably what's being talked about. But with that being said, like, you know, I think the way we build a program and the way we try to establish a program, like, listen, if somebody's gonna, I mean, whether they're going to the NFL or they're gonna make more money, right, somewhere else, right, I think we're all of the nature, right? We want these dudes to maximize their earnings in whatever aspect that they can, right? But I think with the way we run a program, you know, it's about the total development of that young man, right? Like from an academic standpoint to a personal standpoint to a athletic and football standpoint, right? I just met with every player on defense. Coach B just had over 100+ meetings with every player on our roster, and the conversations that were had, you know, like from my standpoint with our guys have been, I mean, I think we got to remember we're still in a development phase of young people, you know, like there's still a process in time that they have to grow and develop. But with those two young men, and Gabe and Xavier in particular, to see them come back, that's truly a belief. Right, that's a belief in the head coach. That's belief in the system, you know. And more importantly, right, like I think with the relationship that we have with them, you know, they weren't out there chasing and searching for things that they felt like they couldn't come back and do again, you know. And that just speaks to, right, like that doesn't happen if there isn't a relationship there. And I think the bond with between us and their parents and them is something that kind of speaks for itself. You know, we are really, really close to a lot of our players' families. And I think Coach B has done a really, really good job in, you know, future getting or forecasting or having conversations like way ahead of when these guys and their options came up and came about. And so a testament to our head coach, right? I think it's always beneficial to have a former player in the room as well, talking to them in regards to doing things and making those transitions. But our hope and goal is to always, right, if we feel like these young men have an option, right, to go to the NFL, our hope and goal is that we can sweeten up that pot a little bit, you know, if they come back here for another year. And we truly believe that, especially with those two guys.
Aaron, you have some interesting chess pieces with JoJo, Daniel Brown, Kaneno Deluga. You got in the sub packages last year. What do those guys allow you to do as a defensive coordinator?
A whole bunch of things. I'll tell you this without telling you everything. Every last one of those guys are going to be utilized from week 1 to week 16 if we're fortunate enough to make it to the 15, 16, fortunate enough to make it to the college football national championship. But I do think that every one of those young men are really, really dynamic. And my goal and our goal as a staff is to use their skill set, right? Alec Bryant is different than Leon Lowry and JoJo Hayden, right? Dylan Rosiak and Malachi Hood is a little different than Kanena, right? Odeluga and Ish Conte, right? Like all those guys or James Croops, all those guys are a tad bit different. And so I think for us, instead of being what we've always been and saying we're going to do this, now let's utilize their skill set, right? What are those guys really, really good at, right? You think about the bowl game, right? Seth Coleman being out, and JoJo being able to provide a spark for us and just a different dynamic in his skill set, right? Being able to do what he did, right? Like watching AB come in and take on a starting role because Seth Coleman was out in that manner. And so we're really trying to, like we do every year, Coach always talks about maximizing your personnel and the personnel groupings. And so now more than ever, you may see a lot of different personnel groupings, but it's truly because our roster has changed, right? Like I think no player wants to come here and wait for 2 or 3 years to try to play. So as a coach, it's our job to, hey, if there's a personnel grouping that we can get them on the field, that there is no drop off in what we do from a schematic and defensive approach, right? Like our job is to make sure that we do that. And I think that we got enough pieces in the building that's going to allow us to kind of have some fun with some of those younger guys, especially.
You mentioned Dylan Rosiak. What's the next step for him? Maybe how has he learned or grown even while being away from the field?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Dylan Rosiak went down during the course of the season, but what he was doing prior to was awesome, right? Like if he can continue to do that, I think he would fill his role. I mean, he wears that C on his chest for a reason. I think that I watched that young man, right, as a freshman, right, go from like not saying much to like a catalyst, pillar, and a captain on our defense. And so, in my exit meeting with him, main thing I just challenged him on is just continuing to lead. And I know sometimes for him, right, there's a level of frustration there, especially when you're out, but he has such strong leadership traits and qualities that like people already know what kind of player he is, and so just continuing to pour into him both on and off the field, because I know when a young man suffers an injury like that, it could kind of hinder his mindset. But I was in those same shoes as Dylan, right? I suffered an injury. I was a captain, right? And so like just continuing to pour into him, to allow him to lead, even though he may have not been out there to end the season. This is still his defense and his team.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good